The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rough wooden walls of the Montana ranch house. Outside, December snow fell thick and silent, burying the world in white. Inside, an old man sat in a worn leather chair, his weathered hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee gone cold. Marcus Thornton was 48 years old, but tonight he felt ancient. His son Samuel, 12 years old and thin as a rail, sat across from him on the floor, staring into the flames with eyes that had seen too much grief for someone so young. The boy's mother had died just 1 year ago, taken by the Spanish flu that had swept across the nation like a reaping scythe. Now, it was just the two of them in this house that felt too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. Marcus watched his son and saw himself. Same age, same hollow look, same question buried deep in those young eyes. Why am I alone? The answer, Marcus knew, was complicated, but the story was simple. And tonight, with the storm howling outside and the firelight painting memories on the walls, it was time to tell it. "Samuel," Marcus said quietly, "come here, son. I want to tell you something." The boy didn't move. He kept staring at the photograph on the mantel, the one of his mother taken just before she got sick. Her smile frozen in time, forever young, forever healthy, forever gone. "Samuel," Marcus tried again, his voice firmer now. "Look at me." Finally, the boy turned. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted from crying when he thought his father couldn't hear. Marcus set down his coffee cup and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Let me tell you about the day I was sold for $20. That got the boy's attention. Samuel's eyes widened. "Sold? Like a slave?" "Not quite," Marcus said, "but close enough. This was back in 1885. I was 13 years old, just 1 year older than you are right now, and I was standing on an auction platform with my 4 brothers and sisters, about to be separated forever." Samuel moved closer, drawn in despite himself. "What happened?" Marcus smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that carried 35 years of weight. "What happened was, I learned the most important lesson of my life. That family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when everything's falling apart." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. The storm was getting worse, just like that night in 1885, when another storm had nearly killed them all. "You think you're alone right now," Marcus said, his breath fogging the cold glass. "You think losing your mother means you've got nobody left. I know that feeling, Samuel. I know it better than anyone." He turned back to face his son. "But you're wrong. You have me. Just like I had Dakota. And before this night is over, you're going to understand what that means." Samuel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Who was Dakota? Marcus returned to his chair, settling in like a man preparing for a long journey. "Dakota Bennett was the man who saved my life, the man who taught me what it means to be a father, the man who proved that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into." He paused, letting the fire pop and hiss, building the moment. "But before I tell you about Dakota, I need to take you back to November 15th, 1885. Back to the worst day of my life. Back to the day everything changed." Marcus closed his eyes, and suddenly he wasn't 48 years old anymore. He was 13, standing on a wooden platform in the cold Montana wind, holding his sister's hand and trying not to cry. "It started at the Silver Creek stockyard," Marcus began, his voice taking on the cadence of memory, of story, of truth told across the decades. 500 people packed into that dusty yard. Ranchers, farmers, merchants, curious townfolk, All of them there to bid on livestock. Horses, cattle, equipment. He opened his eyes and looked at Samuel. And us. 5 children, 5 orphans, 5 pieces of property to be sold to the highest bidder. The boy's face went pale. They really did that? Sold children? They called it placement, Marcus said bitterly. The Territorial Child Welfare Act of 1882, legal as Sunday church. They said they were finding us Christian homes. But we knew what it was. We knew we were being sold. He stood again, unable to sit still with these memories burning in his chest. My parents died that October. Fever took them both in less than a week. My father first, then my mother 3 days later. She held on as long as she could, but in the end, the sickness was too strong. Marcus's voice cracked, and he had to pause. Even after 35 years, talking about his mother's death was like opening an old wound. Her last words to me were, "Keep them together, Marcus. Promise me. No matter what happens, keep them together." And I tried, he continued, fists clenching at his sides. God knows I tried. I was 12 years old, suddenly responsible for 4 younger children. Elena was 11, Owen was 9, Jasper was 6, and Lily, she was only 4 years old. 4. He shook his head, lost in the memory. We lasted 3 weeks on our own. I tried to work the homestead, tried to keep everyone fed, but a child can't run a farm. The church came, social services. They said we needed proper care, proper homes. They promised to keep us together, Marcus said, his voice hardening. That was the first lie. Samuel leaned forward, fully invested now, his own grief momentarily forgotten in the power of his father's story. They took us to an orphanage in Helena, Marcus continued. But the orphanage couldn't keep 5 children. Too expensive. So they split us up. Foster homes, different families. Each one promised they'd take all of us eventually. Each one lied. His jaw tightened. The Hendersons took Owen, made him work from sunrise to sunset, beat him when he asked about us. The Morrisons took Elena. Their 17-year-old son tried to touch her, tried to make her do things no child should ever have to do. Marcus's hands were shaking now, rage and grief mixing together after all these years. Elena ran, took Owen and Jasper and ran in the middle of the night. They found us 2 days later, hiding in a barn. And you know what the social worker said? He looked at Samuel, making sure the boy was listening, making sure he understood. He said we were ungrateful, difficult, problem children. That's how we ended up at the auction, Marcus said quietly. Because nobody wanted 5 difficult children. Nobody wanted the responsibility. So they decided to sell us separately, break us apart, make it easier. He walked to the window again, staring out at the storm. In his mind, he could see that auction platform as clearly as if it were yesterday. Could feel the rough wood under his feet. Could smell the manure and tobacco and fear. I remember every detail, Marcus whispered. The auctioneer was a man named Pritchard. Red face, loud voice, treated us like we were horses being sold for stud. Behind him stood Cornelius Whitmore, the placement coordinator. Clean suit, leather portfolio, smile that never reached his eyes. And in front of us, Marcus continued, his voice dropping lower, 500 faces, strangers, judging us, measuring our worth, deciding if we were valuable enough to bid on. He turned back to Samuel. I stood at the front, trying to shield my brothers and sisters. Elena held Lily, who had her thumb in her mouth and hadn't spoken in days. Owen and Jasper pressed against my back, small bodies trembling with fear. "We were holding hands," Marcus said, and now his voice broke completely. All 5 of us in a chain, holding on so tight our fingers went white, because we knew they were going to tear us apart. The room was silent except for the crackling fire and the howling wind outside. Samuel sat frozen, barely breathing, completely absorbed in his father's words. "Pritchard started his pitch," Marcus continued. "Called us fine children. Said we needed Christian homes. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. Split lot available." That meant, Marcus explained, seeing the confusion on Samuel's face, they could sell us separately, individually, divide us up like we were pieces of furniture. He closed his eyes, remembering. Then a man stepped forward, rich rancher named Harold Sterling. Fancy clothes, gold watch chain, the kind of man who was used to getting what he wanted. He raised his hand and said, $20 for the boy. Marcus's fists clenched so hard, his knuckles went white. $20. That's what I was worth to him. Same price as a saddle. Same price as a good pair of boots. Owen screamed, Marcus said, his voice thick with remembered pain. Tried to run to me. 2 men grabbed him, held him back. He was crying, begging them not to take me. And Elena, she was trying to comfort Lily while holding back her own tears. And Jasper just stood there, clutching his wooden horse, not making a sound. Pritchard raised his hammer, Marcus said, miming the motion. $20 going once, going twice. He paused, letting the moment stretch, just as it had stretched that day when his whole world was about to shatter. And then, Marcus said softly, I heard a voice, deep, rough, angry, coming from the back of the crowd. It said, I'll take all 5. Samuel gasped. Marcus smiled, remembering the shock that had rippled through that stockyard. 500 people went silent, Marcus said. Pritchard froze, with his hammer in the air. Sterling turned, his face going red with fury, and I looked down into the crowd, trying to see who had spoken. That's when I saw him, Marcus said, and his voice changed, became softer, reverent. Dakota Bennett, 42 years old, shoulders like an ox, hands scarred from work, gray beard, blue eyes that looked like they'd seen too much pain. He was pushing through the crowd, and in his hand he held a crumpled stack of bills. Marcus could see it so clearly, even now, could see the determination in Dakota's face, the set of his jaw, the way every eye in that stockyard followed him as he climbed the steps to the platform. $75, Dakota said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. Right now, all 5, together. Pritchard laughed, Marcus remembered. Said the boy was already sold. But Dakota didn't back down. He shoved the money forward and said, That's 55 more than Sterling's offering. Take it, now. Sterling was furious, Marcus continued, started arguing, saying he'd already bid, that it was irregular, that Dakota was unfit, single man, no wife, no experience with children. Marcus smiled grimly. Dakota looked at him and said, I've got a roof, I've got food, I've got heat. What do you have besides a wife who wants a servant? The crowd gasped, Marcus said. Nobody talked to Harold Sterling like that. But Dakota didn't care. He just stood there, holding that money, staring down Sterling and Pritchard and Whitmore, like he was prepared to fight all of them, if necessary. Finally, Marcus said, Whitmore gave in, said Dakota could have us, all 5, for $75. but he'd be conducting inspections, regular inspections, and if he found anything wrong, the placement would be voided. Marcus walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. That's when Dakota turned and looked at us. Really looked at us. And I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in any adult's eyes since my parents died. "What?" Samuel asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Hope," Marcus said simply. "Not for himself, for us. Like maybe, just maybe, this could work." Dakota walked to the platform edge, Marcus continued, extended his hand to me, and he said, "I'm Dakota Bennett. I'm taking you home. All 5 of you. Together." Marcus paused, remembering that moment with perfect clarity. I asked him the question that had defined our lives for 2 months. I asked, "For how long?" "Because everyone said forever," Marcus explained to Samuel. "Everyone promised, and everyone lied." "But Dakota," Marcus said, his voice warming with the memory. "Dakota didn't promise forever. He was too honest for that. He said, 'For as long as you need.'" I told him that's what everyone said, Marcus continued. "And you know what he answered?" Samuel shook his head, completely absorbed. He said, "I ain't them. I just spent every cent I owned to keep you together. So either I'm telling the truth, or I'm the stupidest liar in Montana. Either way, you're stuck with me." Marcus laughed softly. That's when I knew. That's when I knew Dakota was different. Because he didn't promise what he couldn't guarantee. He just told the truth. "So I took his hand," Marcus said, "and that's when my life changed. That's when everything changed." He looked at Samuel, making sure his son understood the parallel. "You think you're alone. You think losing your mother means you have nobody. But you're wrong, Samuel. You have me. And I'm showing up for you the same way Dakota showed up for me." The boy's eyes were wet, but he wasn't looking away. He was listening, really listening. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, around the fire, a father was teaching his son the most important lesson he'd ever learned. That showing up matters more than bloodlines. That promises define us more than birth certificates. It's about who shows up when the world falls apart. Who stays when staying is hard. Who fights when fighting seems pointless. Dakota had shown up for Marcus 35 years ago. And now, Marcus was showing up for Samuel. The story was just beginning. Marcus stood and walked to the fireplace, adding another log to the flames. The wood caught quickly, sending sparks dancing up the chimney like tiny stars. He could feel Samuel's eyes on him, waiting, hungry for more of the story. "Where was I?" Marcus asked, though he knew exactly where he'd left off. Some moments in your life burn so deep into memory that even 35 years can't dim them. "You took Dakota's hand," Samuel said quietly. "You were about to go home with him." "Home," Marcus repeated, tasting the word. Funny thing about that word, I didn't know if I'd ever have one again. Home meant my parents. Home meant the farm where I was born. Home meant everything I'd lost. He turned to face his son. But Dakota said it so simply, like it was a fact, not a promise. "Let's get your family home, not to my place or to the ranch. Home." Marcus sat back down, his eyes distant with memory. The wagon ride took 3 hours. 15 miles north of Silver Creek, through country that got more isolated with every mile. Dakota had borrowed a Conestoga wagon, the kind with oiled canvas stretched over wooden ribs, It wasn't fancy, but it kept the wind out. We climbed in, all 5 of us, Marcus continued. Sat in the back while Dakota took the driver's seat. His horse was a 15-year-old draft mare named Rosie, old but steady. Dakota said she could find her way home in a blizzard if she had to. Samuel shifted closer to the fire, completely absorbed now. For the first hour, nobody spoke, Marcus said. We just sat there in our formation, me at the back, watching the road behind us, always ready to run if this turned out to be another lie. Elena held Lily in her lap, rocking her gently. Owen and Jasper pressed against her sides like they were trying to disappear into her. Marcus's voice grew softer. We'd learned not to trust. 3 foster homes in 2 months, and each one had taught us that adults lie, that promises mean nothing, that the only people we could count on were each other. The snow started around mile 5, he continued. Little flakes at first, then heavier. November in Montana can turn mean fast. The temperature was dropping, and I could see my breath even under the canvas cover. That's when Owen spoke up, Marcus said, and a ghost of a smile crossed his face. His voice was small, scared. He said, "Mr. Dakota, sir, are you going to make us work?" Marcus paused, remembering Dakota's reaction. The wagon kept moving, but I saw Dakota's shoulders tense. His hands tightened on the reins. After a long moment, he said, "Probably. Ranch doesn't run itself." Owen's face went white, Marcus remembered, because at the Hendersons, work meant punishment, meant 14-hour days hauling water, splitting wood, mucking stalls, meant getting beaten if you slowed down or complained or asked to see your family. But then Dakota said something that changed everything, Marcus continued. He said, "Did they feed you? The Hendersons?" Owen whispered, "Sometimes." And Dakota, his voice hard as iron, said, "I'll feed you every day, whether you work or not. That's what you do with kids. You feed them." Marcus leaned forward, making sure Samuel understood. That's when I started to believe. Not fully, not yet, but enough to hope. Then Elena spoke, Marcus said, his voice dropping. This part is hard to talk about, even now. Elena was 11 years old, just a child, but she'd seen things no child should see. He took a breath. She told Dakota about the Morrisons, about their 17-year-old son, about how he'd cornered her in the barn one day, about how he'd tried to touch her, tried to make her do things. Samuel's face went pale with horror. Elena ran, Marcus said firmly. She grabbed Owen and Jasper in the middle of the night and ran. They hid in a barn for 2 days before the sheriff found them. And you know what the social worker said? He said they were ungrateful, difficult, that they'd made up stories to avoid honest work. Marcus's fists clenched. Dakota asked where the Morrisons lived. Elena said about 30 miles south. Dakota just said, "No reason." But I saw his face. I saw him memorize that name, that location. Years later, I learned that Dakota rode there in 1887, had a conversation with that Morrison boy. After that conversation, the boy left Montana Territory and never came back. That's the kind of man Dakota was, Marcus said quietly. He didn't make speeches about protecting us. He just did it. Around mile 10, something happened that I'll never forget, Marcus continued. Jasper spoke. Our little brother, who hadn't said a word since our parents died, who communicated only through nods and headshakes, and that wooden horse he carried everywhere. Marcus's voice grew thick with emotion. He said, "Dakota?" Just that one word. But it was the first word he'd spoken in 6 weeks. Dakota stopped the wagon, Marcus remembered, climbed back into the bed with us, knelt down in front of Jasper, and Jasper held up his wooden horse and said, "His name is Dusty. Pa made him for me, before the fever." Dakota took that horse so gently, Marcus said, his eyes wet now. Examined it like it was the most precious thing in the world. Then he said, "Your pa did good work, Jasper. Real fine craftsmanship. You take care of Dusty. He's counting on you." Marcus wiped his eyes. I saw tears on Dakota's face when he climbed back to the driver's seat. Found out later that his own son, Joshua, had been 6 years old when he died. Same age as Jasper. Had a whole shelf of wooden toys that Dakota had carved for him. "That's when I understood," Marcus said. "Dakota wasn't saving us out of charity or Christian duty. He was saving us because he needed saving too, because we reminded him of what he'd lost. And maybe, just maybe, we could help him find it again." Sparks danced up the chimney. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows. "We reached the ranch at sunset," Marcus continued. "The cabin appeared through the snow like a vision, small, dark, smoke rising from the chimney. 3 rooms of rough-hewn logs with a leaky roof and gaps in the chinking." Owen said, "That's it? That's the ranch?" His voice was disappointed, Marcus remembered, because it was small, humble. Nothing like Sterling's grand house or the Hendersons' big farmstead. But Dakota said, "That's home," Marcus emphasized. And something about the way he said it made it true. "None of us moved at first," Marcus said. "We just sat in that wagon, staring at this cabin that was supposed to be our new life. Afraid to hope, afraid to believe, afraid that if we climbed down and went inside, reality would shatter the illusion." Dakota came around and lifted Lily out, Marcus continued. She went to him without hesitation, wrapped her tiny arms around his neck, and held on like she was afraid he'd drop her. But he wouldn't. Even then, even after knowing us for only 3 hours, I could see that Dakota would die before he let any of us fall. "One by one, we climbed down," Marcus said. Dakota helped each of us. His hands were rough, scarred from years of work, but they were gentle, patient. The cabin door was stuck, Marcus remembered. Dakota had to put his shoulder into it. When it finally opened, warm air rushed out. Wood smoke and coffee and 5 years of loneliness. Marcus stood and began to pace, unable to sit still with these memories flooding back. Dakota lit the lanterns. The cabin came alive with golden light. Main room with a wood stove in the center, a table that seated 4, 2 chairs. Back room to the left, side bedroom to the right. Simple, sparse, but warm. We stood in the middle of the room like 5 statues, Marcus said. Too afraid to sit. Too afraid to touch anything. Too afraid to take up space. Dakota said, "Sit down," Marcus continued. Nobody moved. So he said it again, firmer this time. "That wasn't a suggestion. Sit." We sat, Marcus said with a faint smile. Still in our formation, me behind everyone else, Elena holding Lily, Owen and Jasper on either side. Then Dakota did something I wasn't expecting, Marcus said. He cooked. Not fancy food, just beans and salt pork and cornbread left over from that morning. But he cooked like a man who knew his way around a kitchen, like someone who'd been feeding himself for a long time. Marcus's voice grew quiet. He asked when we'd last eaten. None of us answered. Finally I said, "Yesterday morning. The church gave us bread before the auction." Dakota's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything, just ladled beans into bowls and handed them out. "We ate like animals," Marcus admitted, shame coloring his voice even after all these years. fast, desperate, hiding food in our pockets for later because we'd learned you never knew when the next meal would come. Dakota watched us, Marcus continued, and I could see him learning that Marcus always checked the door, that Elena always fed Lily before herself, that Owen always hid food, that Jasper barely ate at all. When the bowls were empty, Dakota said something that shocked us, Marcus remembered. He said, "There's more when that's gone. As much as you want." Jasper looked up, Marcus said, his voice breaking. His eyes went huge, like the concept of enough food was foreign to him, which it was. We'd been hungry for so long that enough seemed like a fairy tale. After second helpings, after Jasper finally ate a full bowl, Dakota explained the sleeping arrangements. Marcus continued. He said, "Girls in the back room, boys in my bed, I take the floor." I objected immediately, Marcus said. Told him we could sleep on the floor, that he didn't have to give up his bed. But Dakota just looked at me and said, "You're kids, you get beds. I've slept on worse floors in worse places. End of discussion." Marcus sat back down, the memories washing over him. That's when I knew. That's when I really knew that Dakota was different. Because he didn't see us as burdens or workers or problems to solve. He saw us as children, as his children. Getting everyone settled took time, Marcus continued. Elena took Lily to the back room. Owen and Jasper climbed into Dakota's bed, still wearing their coats, still clutching Dusty like a lifeline. I hesitated at the bedroom door, Marcus remembered. Asked Dakota, "What if someone comes? What if they try to take us in the night?" Because we'd been taken so many times before, moved in the dark like stolen goods. Dakota looked at me, Marcus said, and his eyes were hard as flint when he said, "Then I'll handle it. Doors are locked. Stove is hot. I'm right here, and I'll kill anyone who tries to take you." Samuel gasped. Marcus nodded. That's exactly how I reacted, because adults didn't say things like that to children. Adults made soft promises and broke them quietly. But Dakota promised violence, promised death. And somehow that was more comforting than any gentle words could have been. I went to bed that night believing, for the first time in 2 months, that maybe we were safe, Marcus said. Maybe this time would be different. But I couldn't sleep, Marcus continued. I lay there in the dark, listening to Owen's sleep mumbling and Jasper's quiet breathing. And then I heard something that broke my heart all over again. He paused, letting the silence build. From the back room, I heard Lily crying. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet, desperate crying that she was trying to muffle in her pillow. Elena was trying to comfort her, Marcus said, saying, "Shh, baby, it's okay, we're okay." But Lily just kept crying, "I want Mama, I want Mama, where is she?" Marcus's voice cracked. Elena tried to explain, tried to say that Mama was in heaven. But Lily was 4 years old. She didn't understand heaven. She just knew her mother was gone. Finally, Elena said something beautiful, Marcus continued. She said, "Mama's right here, baby, in your heart. Do you feel her?" And after a long moment, Lily whispered, "Yeah, I feel her." Elena said, "Then she's not really gone. She's with us, always." I was lying in the dark, listening to this, Marcus said. And I realized Dakota was too, because I could hear him by the stove, and I could hear him trying not to make any sound, trying not to intrude on this private moment of grief. Marcus looked at Samuel. That's when I heard something I never expected. I heard Dakota crying. This hard man who'd spent $75 on strangers, who'd promised to kill for us, who seemed made of iron and stone. He was crying. Silent tears, Marcus said. The kind that shake your whole body but don't make a sound. the kind that come from somewhere so deep that you can't stop them, even if you want to. I learned later that Dakota hadn't cried since he buried his wife and son 5 years earlier, Marcus continued. Not once in 5 years. But listening to Lily ask for her dead mother, listening to Elena try to explain death to someone too young to understand, something broke in him. That's when I knew we were really a family, Marcus said quietly. Not because of papers or money or promises, but because we were all broken, all grieving, all trying to survive. And maybe, just maybe, we could heal each other. The room was silent except for the fire and the storm. Samuel was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Morning came, Marcus continued, his voice steadier now. I woke to the smell of coffee and cornbread. Elena was already up, helping Dakota make flapjacks. Owen and Jasper were still asleep. Lily was sitting at the table, thumb in her mouth, watching everything with solemn eyes. After breakfast, Dakota called us all together, Marcus said. He sat us down at that too small table and told us what was going to happen. He said, "Today we figure out sleeping arrangements proper. Tomorrow we take stock of supplies. Next week, a man named Whitmore is going to come inspect. Make sure I'm treating you right." I went cold, Marcus remembered. Asked what happened if Whitmore didn't like what he saw. Dakota said, "Then he can recommend the board void our placement." Owen turned white, Marcus said. Elena stopped breathing. Jasper gripped his wooden horse so hard I thought it would break. We'd been with Dakota less than 24 hours, and already someone was trying to take us away. But then Dakota pulled out a letter, Marcus continued, said that Sterling had filed a formal complaint, that the territorial board was meeting in January to decide whether we should stay with Dakota or be placed more appropriately. I knew what more appropriately meant, Marcus said bitterly. It meant split up, separated, torn apart. I stood up, Marcus remembered, said we should run, leave that night, head north where they couldn't find us, live in the woods if we had to. Anything was better than being separated again. But Dakota stopped me, Marcus said. He said, "Running means looking over your shoulder forever. Running means never having a home. I didn't spend $75 for you to spend your lives hiding." He told us his plan, Marcus continued. When Whitmore came, he'd find 5 kids with beds and food and education. 5 kids learning to read, learning to work, learning to be a family. And when the board met, we'd have witnesses, character references, people who could testify that keeping us together was right. Owen asked what happened if that wasn't enough, Marcus said. And Dakota looked at each of us, one by one, making sure we heard him, making sure we believed him. He said, "Then I come get you, every single one of you. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care if I have to fight every lawman between here and Helena. You're my family now, and I don't abandon my family." Marcus's voice grew strong, powerful. "That's a promise, and I keep my promises." That's when everything changed, Marcus said. That's when we stopped being 5 scared orphans and started being a family. Because Dakota had given us something we hadn't had since our parents died. "Hope," Samuel whispered. "Hope," Marcus confirmed. Not empty hope, not false hope, but real, solid hope, backed by action and will and stubborn determination. Dakota assigned us chores, Marcus continued. Me with the horses, Elena in the kitchen, Owen and Jasper on wood duty, and Lily had the most important job of all. Marcus smiled. She was in charge of keeping Dusty company while Jasper worked. Dakota told her that Dusty was scared of the dark, and needed someone brave to protect him. Lily took that job seriously, carried that wooden horse everywhere, talked to it constantly, made sure it was never alone. Over the next few days, we learned the rhythm of the ranch, Marcus said. Wake at dawn, feed the horses, gather eggs, haul water from the well, chop wood, cook meals, clean up, evening lessons by lamplight. Dakota taught us to read every night, Marcus remembered. He had 3 books, a Bible, a farmer's almanac, and a McGuffey reader. We'd crowd around the table, and he'd point to words, have us sound them out, correct our pronunciation. Lily would fall asleep halfway through every lesson, Marcus said with a smile. But the rest of us fought to stay awake, because learning mattered, because education meant opportunity, because maybe, just maybe, if we were smart enough, good enough, valuable enough, they'd let us stay. One night, about a week after we arrived, Dakota and I were in the barn, Marcus continued, teaching me how to check a horse's hooves for stones, how to feel for heat in the legs, how to recognize signs of colic. I asked him why he bought us, Marcus said. Really bought us. Not the story about keeping families together, the real reason. Dakota was quiet for a long time, Marcus remembered. Finally he said, "You remind me of my son. Jasper's the same age Joshua was. 6 years old. Same smile. Same way of looking at the world, like it's full of wonders." He told me about the fever, Marcus continued. How it took Joshua first. 3 days from first cough to last breath. Then Sarah 3 days after that. How Dakota buried them on the hill behind the cabin, next to each other, so they wouldn't be alone. He said, "I've spent 5 years talking to ghosts. 5 years wondering why I'm still here when they're not. 5 years waiting for an answer." Then he looked at me, Marcus said, his voice thick. And he said, "I saw you 5 on that platform, and suddenly I had my answer. I'm still here because you needed me, because I could save you when I couldn't save them." That's when I understood, Marcus said. We weren't saving Dakota from loneliness. We were saving him from himself, from the guilt and grief and endless wondering. We gave him purpose, gave him reason, gave him family. And he gave us the same, Marcus added. We saved each other. That's what families do. He looked at Samuel, who was wiping tears from his face. "That's why I'm telling you this story, son. Because you think you're alone. You think losing your mother means you have nobody. But you're wrong." Marcus stood and walked to his son, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have me, and I'm showing up for you the same way Dakota showed up for me. Every day, every moment, no matter how hard it gets." "You saved me," Marcus said quietly. "When your mother died, when I wanted to give up, you gave me a reason to keep going, just like I gave Dakota a reason 35 years ago." Samuel threw his arms around his father, sobbing into his chest. Marcus held him tight, letting the boy cry, letting him grieve, letting him feel. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, around the fire, a father and son were healing. We're connecting. We're becoming something stronger than grief. "Now," Marcus said, when Samuel's tears finally slowed, "let me tell you about the blizzard, about the night Dakota should have died, about the night I learned what it really means to fight for family." Samuel pulled back, wiping his eyes. "What happened?" Marcus's face grew dark. "Jasper got sick. Pneumonia. The worst I've ever seen. And Dakota rode 20 miles through a storm that killed 3 men that week, just to fetch a doctor. And that," Marcus said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "is when I learned that family isn't just about who shows up when things are easy. It's about who rides through hell itself to save you. The fire crackled, the storm howled, and the story continued, pulling them both deeper into the past, deeper into truth, deeper into understanding what it really means to love someone enough to die for them. Samuel sat up straighter, his grief momentarily forgotten in the grip of the story. The firelight played across his young face, casting shadows that made him look older, more like the man he would someday become. Marcus walked to the window and looked out at the storm. The snow was falling so thick now that he could barely see the barn 50 feet away. Just like that night in 1885, when the world turned white and deadly. "It started 12 days after we arrived at the ranch," Marcus began, his voice low and distant. "December 3rd. I remember the date because it was the day everything nearly fell apart." He turned back to face his son. Jasper woke up coughing, not the normal kind of cough, deep, wet, the kind that sounds like drowning from the inside. Samuel's eyes widened with fear. "I was the first one to hear it," Marcus continued. "I went to his bed and felt his forehead. He was burning up. Fever so hot I pulled my hand back like I'd touched a stove. Dakota came running when he heard me call," Marcus said. One look at Jasper, and his face went gray. He'd seen this before. Same symptoms that took Joshua. Same fever, same cough. Same death sentence in 1885 Montana. Marcus sat back down, the memories washing over him like a cold wave. By noon, Jasper couldn't keep water down. By evening, he was delirious, calling for Mama, calling for Pa, seeing things that weren't there. Elena stayed by his bed all day, Marcus remembered, cooling his forehead with wet cloths, trying to get him to drink, but nothing helped. The fever just kept climbing. Owen was praying, Marcus continued. I didn't even know he knew how to pray. But he knelt by his bed with his hands clasped, whispering to God to please, please save our little brother. And Lily, Marcus's voice cracked. Lily was sitting in the corner, holding Dusty so tight I thought she'd break it. She kept asking, "He's going to be okay, right, Dakota? He's going to be okay?" Marcus paused, letting the weight of that moment settle. Dakota didn't answer, because he didn't lie to children. And the truth was, Jasper was dying. Around 8 o'clock that night, Dakota made a decision, Marcus said. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and said, "I'm going for the doctor." I knew what that meant, Marcus continued. Doc Harrison lived in Silver Creek, 20 miles away, and outside, a blizzard was starting. The kind of storm that kills people who aren't prepared. The kind of storm that smart men don't ride into. I tried to stop him, Marcus said. Told him I'd go instead, that I was lighter, that the horse could move faster with me. But Dakota just looked at me and said, "You stay with your family. They need you here." I argued, Marcus remembered, said they needed him more. But Dakota gripped my shoulders and said something I'll never forget. He said, "Marcus, if I don't come back by morning, you take them to Thompson Farm, 10 miles east. Tell them what happened. They're good people. They'll help." Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. That's when I realized he thought he was going to die. That this was goodbye. "I promised," Marcus said. "Promised I'd take care of everyone if he didn't come back." And then, Dakota did something he'd never done before. He hugged me, quick, rough, like he was trying to put all his love into that one moment because he knew there might not be another. Then he was gone, Marcus continued, out into the storm, into the darkness, into what should have been his death. Samuel was on the edge of his seat now, barely breathing. "We waited," Marcus said. "All night. Elena kept vigil by Jasper's bed. Owen kept praying. Lily fell asleep clutching Dusty. And I stood at the window, watching the snow fall, wondering if I'd ever see Dakota again." The hours crawled by, Marcus remembered. 9 o'clock, 10, midnight, 1 in the morning. No sign of him. No sound except the wind and Jasper's labored breathing and the horrible silence of waiting. Around 2 in the morning, Jasper started talking, Marcus said. Not delirious rambling, clear words. He sat up in bed, eyes wide but not seeing, and said, "Mama? Mama, is that you?" Marcus's voice broke. Elena was crying, holding him. Jasper said, "You look so pretty, Mama, like before you got sick." And then he smiled, this peaceful, beautiful smile. He said, "You want me to come with you?" "Okay, Mama, I'm ready," Marcus continued, tears streaming down his face now. Elena was begging him to stay. Owen was praying louder, and I was frozen at the window, watching my little brother prepare to die. But then Jasper's face changed, Marcus said. He looked confused, said, "What do you mean, Mama? You want me to stay?" But I thought he listened to something we couldn't hear. Then he said, "Okay, Mama, if you say so, I'll stay. I'll take care of Dusty." He laid back down, Marcus remembered, and his breathing changed. Still labored, still sick, but different somehow. Like he'd made a choice. Like he'd decided to live. Dawn came with no sign of Dakota, Marcus continued. The storm was worse. Visibility, 0. Wind howling like demons. I was preparing to gather everyone, to make the journey to Thompson Farm like I'd promised. Then we heard it, Marcus said. Hooves on snow, voices. The door burst open, and there was Doc Harrison, medical bag in hand, snow covering him head to toe. And behind him, Marcus's voice rose with emotion, behind him was Dakota, barely standing, face white with frostbite, hands frozen to the reins. He'd ridden through the storm, through 20 miles of hell, and he'd made it. Dakota took 3 steps into the cabin, Marcus said. Then his legs gave out. He collapsed face first into the snow just inside the door. We all screamed, Marcus remembered. Lily was crying. Owen and Elena were trying to lift him. Doc Harrison was barking orders, telling us to get blankets, to heat water, to stoke the fire higher. For the next hour, we had 2 patients, Marcus continued. Doc Harrison worked on Jasper first, gave him medicine, quinine for the fever, laudanum for the pain, camphor oil to help him breathe. The treatments of 1885. Primitive, but they worked. Jasper's fever broke just before noon, Marcus said. One moment he was burning up, the next he was soaked with sweat, fever gone, sleeping peacefully for the first time in 20 hours. Dakota woke up around the same time, Marcus continued. He was on his bedroll by the stove, wrapped in every blanket we owned. His hands were bandaged. Early frostbite on 3 fingers. His face was raw where the wind had burned him. First thing he said was, "Jasper?" Marcus remembered. I told him the fever broke, that Jasper was going to live, and Dakota closed his eyes and said, "Good, that's good." Doc Harrison pulled me aside, Marcus said. Told me Dakota had hypothermia, frostbite, exhaustion. That if he'd been out there another hour, he'd be dead. That it was the stupidest, bravest thing he'd ever seen anyone do. Marcus stood and began to pace again, unable to contain the emotion. Later that day, when both patients were stable, I went into the bedroom where Jasper was sleeping. Dakota was sitting beside the bed, holding Jasper's small hand in his bandaged one. Jasper woke up, Marcus said. His first words were, "Dakota, I saw Mama. She was beautiful. Dakota just nodded, Marcus remembered. Asked what Mama said. Jasper told him. Said Mama told him it wasn't time yet, that he had to stay. Had to take care of Dusty. Had to take care of Dakota, too. That's when Dakota broke down, Marcus said quietly. This hard man who'd ridden through a blizzard, who'd spent his last dollar on strangers, who'd promised to kill anyone who tried to take us. He put his head down on that bed and sobbed. Jasper patted his head with one small hand, Marcus continued. Said, "It's okay, Dakota. Mama said you're lonely. Said we have to take care of you too. That's what families do." And in that moment, Marcus said, his voice thick, we stopped being Dakota's wards. We stopped being charity cases or orphans or problems to solve. We became his children. Really, truly became his family. Samuel was crying openly now, but he didn't look away. Doc Harrison stayed 2 days, Marcus continued. Made sure both patients were stable. Before he left, he pulled Dakota aside. I was in the next room, but I could hear every word. He said, "Bennett, that was the dumbest thing you've ever done," Marcus remembered. Dakota said, "I know." Harrison said, "You should be dead." Dakota said, "I know." Then Harrison said, "But that boy would be dead if you hadn't. You saved each other. Remember that." For the next 4 days, we recovered, Marcus said. Dakota's hands healed slowly. The frostbite wasn't severe, but his fingers stayed sensitive to cold for the rest of his life. Every winter, they'd ache. Every storm, they'd remind him of the night he rode through hell for us. Jasper recovered faster, Marcus continued. Within a week, he was up and moving around. Thin, weak, but alive. He never let Dusty out of his sight after that. Said Mama told him to keep it safe, that it was important. Marcus sat back down, the hardest part of the story coming now. On the 7th day after the blizzard, a buggy appeared on the road. Black, expensive, official-looking. "Whitmore," Samuel breathed. "Whitmore," Marcus confirmed. 4 days early, which meant Sterling had sent him. Which meant this wasn't a routine inspection. This was an ambush. Dakota saw the buggy and his jaw tightened, Marcus remembered. He told me to get everyone cleaned up, to make the cabin look like a home, not a hideout. Then he went out to meet Whitmore on the road. "I watched from the window," Marcus said. "Saw them talking. Saw Whitmore gesturing, Dakota standing firm. After 5 minutes, they walked back to the cabin together." Whitmore came inside, Marcus continued. Same pressed suit, same leather portfolio, same smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked around the cabin, taking notes. Looked at us like we were livestock being evaluated. He asked us questions, Marcus said. Were we getting enough food? Who did the cooking? What about education? Did we have beds? Were we being worked beyond our abilities? We answered carefully, Marcus remembered. Elena said we got 3 meals a day. I said I helped with ranch work, same as I'd helped at our homestead. Owen said nothing about the Hendersons. Jasper whispered that Dakota saved him. Whitmore was writing everything down, Marcus continued, making notes, building his case. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Marcus leaned forward. He said, "Mr. Bennett, I'm required to inform you that Mr. Sterling has filed a formal complaint with the Territorial Board. A hearing has been scheduled for January 15th in Helena. You and the children are required to appear." Dakota just nodded, Marcus said. Asked what the complaint alleged. Whitmore read from his notes. Unsuitable guardian, inadequate facilities, no female supervision for girls, irregular bidding process, Children would be better served in separate, appropriate placements. That last phrase, Marcus said bitterly. Separate, appropriate placements. That was code for splitting us up. But then, Marcus continued, something unexpected happened. Whitmore closed his portfolio and looked at Dakota. Really looked at him. At this man with bandaged hands who'd nearly died saving a child. He said, "Mr. Bennett, off the record, what you did was remarkable," Marcus remembered. Dakota said, "I did what any father would do." Whitmore shook his head, said, "No. You did what every father should do. There's a difference." Then Whitmore did something that shocked us all, Marcus said. He told us a story about how he was 8 years old when they separated him from his 6-year-old sister, how they promised it was temporary, how he never saw her again. He said he'd spent 40 years wondering if she was alive, Marcus continued, if she remembered him, if she hated him for not fighting harder to stay together. Whitmore looked at us, Marcus said, at 5 children still holding together, and he said, "I came here to build a case against you, to give Sterling what he wants. But I can't do that. Not after what I've seen." Dakota asked what he was going to do, Marcus remembered. Whitmore said he'd write an honest report, that the children were adequately housed, fed, educated, that the guardian appeared committed to their welfare, that the placement should continue. But then he warned us, Marcus said Sterling had connections, that Mr. Clemens on the territorial board was Sterling's friend, that we'd need more than Whitmore's report. We'd need witnesses, character references. We'd need to prepare to fight. He gave us names, Marcus continued. Doc Harrison, Sheriff Boone, a reporter named Clara Morrison who'd written about orphan auctions, people who might testify on our behalf. Before he left, Whitmore said one more thing, Marcus remembered. He said, "Mr. Bennett, that hearing in January, everything depends on it. If you lose, these children will be separated, and there won't be anything I can do to stop it." The door closed, Marcus said. 5 children looked at Dakota. Dakota looked at us. And in that moment, we all understood. We had 6 weeks to prepare for the fight of our lives. Over the next weeks, we got ready, Marcus continued. Dakota rode to town twice, once to see Doc Harrison, who agreed to testify, once to see Sheriff Boone and Clara Morrison, who both agreed to come to the hearing. Elena started a journal, Marcus said, Dakota's idea. She wrote down everything, what we ate for breakfast, lunch, dinner, what lessons we had, what chores we did, what books we read, creating a record that showed we were being properly cared for. I practiced reading, Marcus continued, because Dakota said I might need to testify, that I might need to stand in front of the board and explain why we should stay together. So every night I read aloud until my voice went hoarse. Owen helped with everything, Marcus said, worked twice as hard on chores, learned his letters, tried to be perfect, tried to be the kind of boy nobody could complain about. And Jasper, Marcus's voice softened. Jasper talked more, started telling stories, started laughing, started being a 6-year-old boy instead of a frightened, silent ghost. Lily was just Lily, Marcus said with a smile, 4 years old and convinced that as long as she took care of Dusty, everything would be fine. She'd carry that wooden horse everywhere, talk to it constantly, tell it not to worry because Dakota wouldn't let anyone take them away. Christmas came, Marcus continued. We didn't have money for presents, but Dakota took us into the woods and we cut down a small pine tree, brought it inside, decorated it with strings of popcorn and dried berries. On Christmas morning, Dakota gave us something better than store-bought gifts, Marcus said. He gave us his word, stood by that tree and said, "I promise you, no matter what happens at that hearing, no matter what the board decides, I will not let you be separated. That's my Christmas gift to you, my word, my bond."
And we believed him, Marcus said simply, because Dakota Bennett had already proven he'd die for us. So believing he'd fight for us was easy. January came cold and hard, Marcus continued. The 12th of January, we packed the wagon. Dakota borrowed a larger one from Thompson Farm. Covered top. Room for all 6 of us. Provisions for 4 days. The journey to Helena took 2 days, Marcus said. 110 miles through winter landscape. We stopped at Fort Shaw the first night. Military post where Dakota had sold horses before. They gave us space in the barracks. Second day, we covered the final 55 miles, Marcus continued. Arrived in Helena late afternoon on January 13th, the day before the hearing. Helena was the biggest town I'd ever seen, Marcus remembered. 4,000 people. Buildings 3 stories tall, wooden sidewalks, gas lamps. The courthouse was brick, 2 stories, imposing as a fortress. "We found a boarding house," Marcus said. "Mrs. Patterson's. 1 room for all 6 of us. 2 beds. We'd manage. We'd slept in worse places." That night we tried to rest, Marcus continued. But nobody could sleep. We all knew. Tomorrow, everything would be decided. Tomorrow, we'd either stay together or be torn apart forever. Marcus looked at his son. The man who'd left us at the orphanage, Thomas Thornton. Samuel's eyes widened. "Your uncle?" "Yes, our mother's brother." I was furious, Marcus said. Exploded. Yelled at him. Asked how he dared show his face. How he dared come back after abandoning us. But Thomas just stood there, Marcus continued, taking it, not defending himself. When I finally stopped yelling, he said, "I know what I did, and I know nothing I say can make it right. But I came to explain, and to help, if you'll let me." He told us the truth, Marcus said, that he'd gotten the same fever that killed our parents, that he'd spent 3 months in a Denver hospital, barely alive, that by the time he recovered, we'd been placed and he couldn't find us. He showed us proof, Marcus continued, hospital papers, letters to orphanages, petitions to welfare boards, evidence that he'd searched for 6 months, that he hadn't abandoned us by choice. Then he said something that changed everything, Marcus remembered. He said, "I'm here to testify tomorrow, to tell the board that I'm your uncle, that I have legal claim to you, and that I'm giving up that claim in favor of Dakota." We were shocked, Marcus said. Thomas explained, said he could petition for custody, that as blood relative he'd probably win, but that he wasn't going to do that. He said Dakota had done in 2 months what he couldn't do in 40 years, Marcus continued. Made us a family, given us a home, made us whole. That's when Lily walked over to him, Marcus said softly. Our 4-year-old sister who didn't remember him at all. She looked up at him and asked, "Are you nice?" Thomas knelt down, Marcus remembered, said, "I try to be." Lily studied him seriously. Then she took his hand and said, "Okay, you can visit, but you can't stay forever because we already have a family." Thomas started crying, Marcus said, and so did the rest of us. Because Lily was right. We had a family. Dakota, Elena, Owen, Jasper, Lily, me. We were a family. That night none of us slept, Marcus continued. We sat up talking. Thomas told us stories about our mother when she was young, about our father, about family history we'd never known. And Dakota, Marcus said, Dakota sat quiet, listening, knowing that tomorrow everything he'd fought for would be decided by 3 men in a courthouse. As the night wore on, as the others finally fell asleep, I found Dakota sitting by the window, Marcus remembered, looking out at the dark streets of Helena. I sat beside him, Marcus said, asked if he was scared. He said, terrified. Asked if he thought we'd win. He said, I don't know, but I know this. If we lose, I'll come get you, every single one of you, law or no law. Family is who shows up, Marcus said quietly. Who fights, who sacrifices, who loves you enough to ride through storms and face down courts and give up their own claims because your happiness matters more than their rights. Who fights, who sacrifices, who loves you enough to ride through storms and face down courts and give up their own claims because your happiness matters more than their rights. Morning came, Marcus continued. January 14th, 1886. The day that would decide everything. He stood and walked to the fire, adding another log. Samuel, are you ready to hear how it ended? Ready to hear about the hearing? About the verdict? About what happened when 5 children stood before 3 men and begged not to be torn apart? Samuel nodded, unable to speak. Then let me tell you, Marcus said, about the fight of our lives. The clock on Marcus's mantel chimed midnight. Outside, the storm had reached its peak, wind screaming around the corners of the house like something alive and angry. But inside, father and son sat transfixed by firelight and memory, lost in a story that had begun 35 years ago in a courthouse in Helena. January 14th, 1886, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. 9 o'clock in the morning, the coldest day I can remember, and not just because of the weather. He settled back into his chair, his gaze distant. The Lewis and Clark County Courthouse was already packed when we arrived. Room meant for 100 people, but there must have been 150 crammed inside. Standing room only. Everyone wanted to see what would happen to the 5 orphans and the rancher who'd bought them at auction. Samuel pulled a blanket tighter around his shoulders, listening. The courtroom had high ceilings, Marcus continued. Tall windows that let in weak winter light. At the front, a raised bench where 3 men sat like judges of our fate. Chairman Porter in the middle, kind eyes, gray beard, former rancher himself. Mr. Clemens to his left, Sterling's friend, hostile from the moment we walked in. And Reverend Michaels to the right, Methodist minister, unreadable, the swing vote. Everything depended on him, Marcus said quietly. On one man we'd never met. One man who'd decide if we stayed together or got torn apart forever. There were 2 tables facing the bench, Marcus remembered. Sterling sat at the left table with his lawyer, Richard Blackwell. Expensive suit, slicked back hair, the kind of lawyer rich men hire when they want to win, no matter what the cost. We sat at the right table, Marcus continued. Dakota in the chair, the 5 of us behind him in a row. Same formation as always. Me closest to Dakota. Elena holding Lily. Owen and Jasper pressed together. We were wearing our best clothes, which weren't much. Patched and mended, but clean. The room smelled like wood polish and old paper and fear, Marcus said. I could feel everyone's eyes on us. Some sympathetic, some curious, some hostile, some just wanting a good show. Chairman Porter banged his gavel, Marcus remembered. Said, This hearing will come to order. We're here to review the placement of Marcus, Elena, Owen, Jasper, and Lily Thornton, currently in the custody of Dakota Bennett under territorial welfare guidelines. He explained the complaint, Marcus continued, that Sterling alleged the placement was obtained through coercion, that we'd be better served in alternative arrangements. That word again, alternative, separate, apart. Sterling's lawyer stood up, Marcus said. Blackwell. He was smooth, practiced, made his case sound so reasonable you'd almost believe it if you didn't know better. He said Dakota was unsuitable, Marcus remembered. Single man, no wife, no experience with children, limited resources. He made it sound like keeping us was an act of selfishness, not love. He talked about Sterling's offer, Marcus continued. How Marcus would learn valuable trade skills. How Elena would receive proper feminine guidance. How the younger children would get institutional care until suitable families could be found. He made separating us sound like mercy, Marcus said bitterly. Like we were being cruel to ourselves by insisting on staying together. Clemens was nodding the whole time, Marcus remembered, taking notes, already convinced. Porter looked skeptical, but was listening carefully. Michaels just sat there, face like stone, giving nothing away. Then Sterling himself testified, Marcus said, stood up in his fine clothes with his gold watch chain and talked about how he only wanted to help, how he saw potential in me, how under his guidance I'd have a future, how keeping 5 children together wasn't practical or fair to us. He sounded sincere, Marcus admitted. That's what made it so dangerous. He actually believed what he was saying. Believed that his money and his house and his position meant he knew what was best for us, better than we knew ourselves. The crowd was shifting, Marcus continued. Some people nodding, murmuring agreement. I felt panic rising in my chest. We were losing. Before we'd even started, we were losing. Then it was our turn, Marcus said. Dakota stood and called his first witness, Doc Harrison. The doctor walked to the front, Marcus remembered. Weathered face, tired eyes, but his voice was strong when he spoke. He told them about the blizzard, about how Dakota rode 20 miles through a storm that killed 3 men that week, about the frostbite and hypothermia, and how close Dakota came to dying. He said, "That's not the action of an unsuitable guardian. That's the action of a father," Marcus continued. Said he'd known Dakota 5 years and never met a man of better character. Said if more parents loved their children half as much as Dakota loved those 5 orphans, the world would be a better place. Clemens tried to dismiss it, Marcus said. Said it was admirable but irrelevant. That one act of bravery didn't qualify someone to raise 5 children. But Porter shut him down. Said it was absolutely relevant, that character mattered more than money or marital status. Next came Sheriff Boone, Marcus continued. He testified about the auction, about how shameful it was, about how children were being sold like livestock, about how Sterling bid $20 for me, same price as a saddle, and was going to leave the others to be parceled out. He said Dakota did what everyone else in that stockyard should have done, Marcus remembered. Stopped it, kept a family together, made something right in a world that was going very wrong. Then came the moment that changed everything, Marcus said, leaning forward. Dakota called Thomas Thornton to testify. The room exploded, Marcus continued. Everyone talking at once. Sterling's lawyer objected, said this wasn't disclosed, that it changed everything. Because Thomas was our uncle, blood relative. Under territorial law, he had priority claim. Chairman Porter demanded order, Marcus remembered. Asked Thomas to explain himself. And Thomas stood there in front of 150 people and told the truth. He said, I'm their uncle. I have legal claim to these children. Under territorial law, I could petition for custody and would likely win, Marcus continued. The courtroom went silent. Even Dakota looked shocked. Then Thomas said, "But I'm not going to do that," Marcus remembered, his voice thick with emotion. Said, "I failed these children once. When they needed me most, I wasn't there. I won't fail them again by destroying what Dakota has built." He told them everything, Marcus continued, about the fever, about the hospital, about searching for 6 months, about finding the newspaper article about the hearing and coming as fast as he could. He said, "I'm asking you, begging you, don't destroy this family," Marcus remembered. Said Dakota had done in 2 months what he couldn't do in 40 years. That he was giving up his claim, that we should stay with Dakota. The room was silent except for crying, Marcus said. People in the audience. Clara Morrison scribbling in her notebook. Even Clemens looked shaken. But Sterling's lawyer wasn't done, Marcus continued. He stood up and said that regardless of sentiment, the law was clear. That practical concerns remained. That one man couldn't adequately care for 5 children. "That's when I stood up," Marcus said quietly. Samuel's eyes went wide. "I didn't plan it," Marcus continued. "Didn't ask permission. Just stood up and said, 'I'd like to testify.'" Blackwell objected immediately, Marcus remembered. Said children couldn't simply interrupt proceedings. But Reverend Michaels spoke for the first time. He said, "If we're deciding this boy's fate, we should hear his voice." Chairman Porter agreed, Marcus said. Told me to approach the bench. So I walked to the front of that courtroom, 13 years old, terrified, but angrier than I'd ever been in my life. I stood in front of those 3 men, Marcus continued, and I told them the truth, all of it, about watching my parents die, about being responsible for 4 younger siblings at 12 years old, about the orphanage, about being promised we'd stay together and being lied to, about foster homes, about the Hendersons and the Morrisons, and all the ways adults had failed us. I told them about the auction, Marcus said, about standing on that platform knowing we were about to be torn apart, about Sterling bidding $20 for me like I was livestock, about the auctioneer saying, "Split lot available," like we weren't human beings with hearts that could break. Then I told them about Dakota, Marcus continued, his voice rising with the memory. About how he stood up when everyone else stayed silent. About how he spent everything he had to keep us together. About how he rode through a blizzard that should have killed him to save my little brother. I looked at Sterling, Marcus said. Looked him right in the eye and said, "You want to talk about what's best for us? You don't know anything about us. You don't know what we need. You just know what you want. And what you want isn't us. It's what we can do for you." I turned back to the board, Marcus remembered. "You said the words that had been burning in my chest since my mother died." I said, "We've lost our parents. We've lost our home. We've lost everything except each other. Please, please don't take that too." My voice broke on that last word, Marcus said, and suddenly I was crying in front of 150 people, sobbing like the 13-year-old child I was, instead of the man I'd been trying so hard to be. The courtroom was silent, Marcus continued. Complete, absolute silence. Then Lily's voice from the back of the room, small and confused, saying, "Marcus? Did we win?" The room erupted, Marcus said, half the audience laughing, half crying, even some of the men. Even Chairman Porter was wiping his eyes. I walked back to my seat, Marcus remembered. Dakota gripped my shoulder so hard it hurt. But it was a good hurt. The kind that says, "I'm here. I've got you. You're not alone." Porter called for order, Marcus continued. Said the board would deliberate, that we'd reconvene in 30 minutes. And then we waited. "Longest 30 minutes of my life," Marcus said. We went out into the hallway. Dakota, the 5 of us, Thomas, Doc Harrison, Sheriff Boone. Nobody spoke. We just stood there, waiting for 3 men to decide our fate. "I watched the courtroom doors," Marcus remembered. "Watched them like they were the gates of heaven or hell, because that's what they were. Behind those doors, our entire future was being decided." "Finally they opened," Marcus said. "A clerk came out and said the board was ready. We filed back in. The crowd that had left to stretch now rushed back in, packing the room even tighter than before. We took our seats," Marcus continued, "the 5 of us behind Dakota, all holding hands now, a human chain. If we were going down, we were going down together." "Chairman Porter stood," Marcus said, and even now, 35 years later, his voice went quiet with remembered fear. His face was unreadable. I couldn't tell if it was good news or bad. Couldn't tell if we'd won or lost. He said, "After careful deliberation, the Territorial Board of Montana has reached a decision regarding the placement of Marcus, Elena, Owen, Jasper, and Lily Thornton," Marcus continued. And then he paused, just stopped talking, looking down at his papers. "I couldn't breathe," Marcus said. "Literally couldn't make my lungs work. Elena was squeezing my hand so hard I thought bones would break. Jasper was crying silently. Owen was praying under his breath. Lily was buried in Elena's shoulder." Porter looked up, Marcus said, looked right at us, and he said, "It is the decision of this board that the current placement with Dakota Bennett be made permanent." "I didn't understand at first," Marcus admitted. "The words didn't make sense. Permanent. What did permanent mean?" Then Porter said, "Mr. Sterling's complaint is hereby dismissed," Marcus continued. And the room exploded. People were cheering, Marcus said, applauding, stamping their feet. Clara Morrison was scribbling furiously. Doc Harrison was grinning. Sheriff Boone was nodding with satisfaction. Thomas was crying openly. "And we," Marcus said, his voice breaking, "we tackled Dakota, all 5 of us, knocked him right out of his chair onto the floor. Screaming and crying and laughing all at once. We won," Marcus remembered. "We're staying together. Forever." He said permanent. "That means forever, right, Dakota?" Dakota was on the floor with 5 children piled on top of him, Marcus continued. And he was laughing and crying at the same time, saying, "Forever. Yes, forever. I promise. Forever." "I looked up from that pile of bodies," Marcus said, "and I saw Sterling. He was standing at his table, face red with fury, gathering his papers. He stormed out without a word, defeated. His lawyer followed, looking embarrassed. But we didn't care," Marcus continued. "We'd won. We were together. We were a family. Really, legally, permanently a family." Outside the courthouse, the snow was falling again, Marcus remembered. But it didn't feel cold anymore. Nothing could touch us. We were invincible. Thomas approached Dakota, Marcus said, shook his hand, said, "Thank you for saving them when I couldn't." Dakota said, "Thank you for letting me." Then Thomas looked at me, Marcus continued, asked if he could visit sometimes, be part of our lives. I told him yes.
that he was family too, that families don't turn people away. We stayed in Helena one more night, Marcus said. Celebrated at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house with bread and cheese and the cheap wine Thomas bought. Even let us kids have a sip. Tasted terrible, but we didn't care. The journey home took 2 days, Marcus continued. Same route in reverse, but everything felt different. Lighter, like we'd been carrying a mountain on our backs, and someone had finally lifted it off.
When we got back to the ranch, it looked different too, Marcus said. Not the building. That was the same small cabin with the leaky roof. But it felt different. Felt like home. Really, truly home. Because we knew now, Marcus continued, knew without doubt that this was where we belonged, that Dakota was our father, that we were his children, that nothing and nobody could tear us apart. The years that followed were good, Marcus said softly. Not easy, never easy. Ranch life is hard. Money was always tight. Winters were brutal. But we were together, and that made everything else bearable. I grew up on that ranch, Marcus continued. Learned everything Dakota could teach me, about horses and cattle, and fixing fences and reading weather, about being a man, about being a father, about keeping promises even when they're hard. Elena became an amazing cook, Marcus said. Could make a feast out of nothing. Eventually married a good man, moved to the neighboring ranch. We see each other almost every day. Owen grew strong, Marcus continued. Worked the ranch with me until he was 18, then joined the cavalry. Served 10 years. Came back and started his own spread 30 miles north. Jasper, Marcus said with a sad smile. Jasper kept that wooden horse his whole life. Became a carpenter. Makes furniture. Beautiful pieces. Each one has a small horse carved into it somewhere. His signature. His memory of Pa. And Lily, Marcus's voice warmed. Lily married young, had 6 children, lives in Helena now, writes to me every week, still signs her letters, your baby sister who you protected. Dakota lived another 18 years, Marcus said quietly. Died in 1903. He lived long enough to see us all grow strong, to meet your mother, to hold you when you were born. We buried him on the hill next to Sarah and Joshua, where he wanted to be. At the funeral, all 5 of us stood around his grave, Marcus remembered. Not children anymore, adults, but still his children, still a family. Elena said something I'll never forget, Marcus said. She said, he saved us, but we saved him too. We gave him a reason to live when he thought he had none left. And she was right, Marcus continued. We gave each other purpose. We healed each other. That's what families do. He looked at Samuel, who was crying silently, tears streaming down his face. That's why I told you this story, son, Marcus said gently. Because you think you're alone. You think losing your mother means you have nobody. But you're wrong. Marcus moved to sit beside his son, putting an arm around the boy's thin shoulders. You have me, just like I had Dakota. And I'm going to show up for you every single day. Fight for you, protect you, love you. Because that's what fathers do. Families aren't born, Marcus continued. They're chosen, built, forged in fire and storms and impossible odds. Your mother and I chose each other. We chose to build a family. And when she died, that family didn't end. It changed. But it didn't end. You and me,
Marcus said firmly. We're still a family. We're going to get through this, together. Same way Dakota and I got through everything. By showing up, by keeping promises, by never, ever giving up. Samuel turned and buried his face in his father's chest, sobbing. Marcus held him tight, letting the grief flow, letting the healing begin. Outside, the storm was finally breaking, the wind dying down, the snow easing. Dawn was still hours away, but Marcus could feel it coming, could feel the darkness beginning to lift. "You know what Dakota told me the day before he died?" Marcus asked softly. Samuel shook his head against his father's chest. He said, "Marcus, I didn't save you. You saved me. You gave me a reason to keep living when I'd lost everything that mattered. That's what family does. We save each other." Marcus held his son tighter. "And that's what we're going to do, Samuel. We're going to save each other, every single day, for as long as we both shall live." The fire burned low. The storm passed. And in that ranch house in Montana, a father and son sat together in the darkness, not alone, never alone, bound together by a promise that echoed across 35 years. The promise of family, the promise of love, the promise that some bonds, once forged, can never be broken. Not by death, not by grief, not by anything. They were home. They were together. And that was enough. That was everything. The fire had burned down to embers, glowing soft and red in the darkness. Marcus held his son until the boy's sobs quieted, until his breathing steadied, until the grief that had been poisoning him for a year finally began to drain away. Samuel pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. His face was blotchy and wet, but there was something different in his expression now. Something lighter, like a weight he'd been carrying had finally been set down. "Pa," he said, his voice hoarse from crying. "Do you still miss her? Even after a year?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Every single day, every single moment. Your mother was the best thing that ever happened to me, besides you. Losing her felt like losing half my soul." "Then how do you keep going?" Samuel asked. "How do you get up every morning and pretend everything's okay when it's not?" "I don't pretend," Marcus said quietly. "I never pretend. The grief is real, Samuel. It's always there. Some days it's a whisper. Some days it's a scream. But I keep going because of what Dakota taught me." He stood and walked to the mantel, picking up the faded photograph. 6 people, 1 family, frozen in time at the moment they'd won their fight to stay together. "Dakota taught me that love doesn't end when someone dies," Marcus continued. "It transforms, changes shape. Your mother isn't gone, Samuel. She's right here," he touched his chest, "in every decision I make, every word I speak, every time I look at you and see her eyes staring back at me." Samuel came to stand beside his father, looking at the photograph. "Which one is you?" Marcus pointed to the 13-year-old boy, standing protective in front of his siblings. "That's me. Day after the hearing. Photographer came to the ranch to document us for Clara Morrison's newspaper article. We were so proud, so happy, so sure that the hard part was over." "Was it?" Samuel asked. "Was the hard part over?" Marcus smiled. "Son, the hard part is never over. Life doesn't work that way. But we faced everything together, every storm, every drought,
Every time money got tight, or crops failed, or animals died. We faced it as a family. He pointed to each person in the photograph. That's Elena, 11 years old there, scared but trying to be brave. She's your Aunt Elena now, the one who brings us preserves every fall, who came and stayed with us for 3 months after your mother died. That's Owen, Marcus continued, 9 years old, still having nightmares about the Hendersons, but starting to smile again. He's the one who taught you to ride last summer, who gave you that pocket knife for your birthday. That's Jasper, Marcus said softly, 6 years old, barely speaking, clutching that wooden horse. He carved the rocking horse in your bedroom. Did you know that? Made it special for you when you were born. Put a secret horse hidden under the seat, his signature. And that's Lily, Marcus said, his voice warm. 4 years old, thumb in her mouth. She's the one who writes you letters with drawings in the margins, who always sends peppermint sticks at Christmas. Samuel studied each face. They all stayed close, even after growing up. That's what Dakota taught us, Marcus said. Family isn't just about living under the same roof. It's about showing up, about being there when it matters, about keeping the promises you make. He set the photograph back on the mantel. After Dakota died, we could have scattered, gone our separate ways, built separate lives, but we didn't, because he'd given us something more valuable than land or money. What? Samuel asked. He gave us each other, Marcus said simply. He showed us that family is the only thing that really matters, that you can lose everything else, your home, your money, your health. But if you have family, you have everything. Marcus walked back to his chair, but this time Samuel followed, sitting on the floor at his father's feet like he used to when he was small. There's something else I need to tell you, Marcus said. Something I didn't include in the story. Samuel looked up, curious. After we won the hearing, after we came home, Sterling didn't give up, Marcus continued. He spent 2 years trying to find ways to take us away from Dakota. Filed complaint after complaint, sent inspectors, tried to prove Dakota was unfit. What happened? Samuel asked. Dakota fought every single time, Marcus said, answered every question, passed every inspection, proved over and over that we were loved and cared for. And finally, in 1888, Sterling gave up, moved to California, died there 10 years later, a bitter old man who never understood that children aren't property to be owned. Marcus paused. But those 2 years taught me something important. Keeping a family together isn't something you do once. It's something you do every single day. You fight for it. You work for it. You sacrifice for it. Is that what you're doing now? Samuel asked. Fighting to keep us together? Every single day, Marcus confirmed. When your mother died, I wanted to give up. Wanted to lie down and never get up. The grief was so heavy I couldn't breathe. But then I'd look at you and remember Dakota. Remember what he taught me. What did he teach you? Samuel asked. Marcus leaned forward, making sure his son heard every word. He taught me that love is a verb, not a feeling. It's not about what you feel, it's about what you do. You show up. You keep promises. You fight when fighting seems impossible. He taught me that being a father isn't about being perfect, Marcus continued. It's about being present, about doing your best even when your best isn't very good, about loving your children more than you love your own comfort. And he taught me, Marcus said, his voice thick, that the greatest gift you can give someone is to never, ever give up on them. No matter how hard things get, no matter how much it hurts, you stay, you fight, you love. Samuel was crying again, but different tears now, not grief tears, understanding tears. I miss Mama, Samuel said. So much it feels like I'm being torn apart from the inside." "I know," Marcus said. "I miss her too. But son, she's not really gone. She lives in you, in me." In every moment we shared with her, in every lesson she taught us, in every time we choose kindness over anger, hope over despair, love over fear. He reached down and took Samuel's hand. "Your mother made me promise something before she died. Same promise my mother made me make. She said, 'Take care of our boy. Keep him safe. Keep him whole. Don't let the grief destroy him.' And I promised," Marcus continued. "Same way I promised my mother I'd keep my siblings together. Same way Dakota promised he'd never let us be separated. I promised your mother that I'd take care of you, that I'd show you how to survive grief without being destroyed by it." "How?" Samuel asked. "How do you survive it?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "You carry it. You don't try to ignore it or push it away. You carry it like a scar, like something that's part of you but doesn't define you. The grief becomes part of your story, but it doesn't become the whole story." "And you let people help you carry it," Marcus added. "That's what family is for, sharing the burden, taking turns being strong when the other person is weak." He squeezed Samuel's hand. "You've been trying to carry this alone, trying to be strong for me, trying not to cry where I can see. But that's not how families work, son. We carry things together." Samuel nodded, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. "One more part of the story I need to tell you." He stood and walked to a cabinet in the corner, opened it and pulled out something wrapped in oiled cloth, brought it back and carefully unwrapped it. A wooden horse, old, worn smooth by decades of handling, but still beautiful, still perfect. "Dusty," Samuel breathed. "Dusty," Marcus confirmed. "Jasper gave it to me when Dakota died. Said Dakota would want me to have it. Said it represented everything Dakota believed about family, about keeping promises, about holding on, even when letting go seems easier." He placed the wooden horse in Samuel's hands. "I'm giving it to you now, not because I'm dying or going anywhere, but because you need to understand something." Samuel held the horse carefully, reverently. "This horse was carved by my father," Marcus said, "given to Jasper when he was 6 years old. Jasper carried it through the orphanage, through foster homes, through the auction, through everything. It was his anchor, his reminder that he came from somewhere, that he mattered. When Dakota died, it became my anchor," Marcus continued. "My reminder of what he taught me, of the promises I'd made, of the man I wanted to be. Now it's yours," Marcus said. "Your anchor. Your reminder that you come from a long line of people who didn't give up, who fought for family, who kept promises even when keeping them was impossible." Samuel clutched the horse to his chest. "I'll take care of it, I promise." "I know you will," Marcus said. "But more than that, I want you to understand what it represents. This horse has been passed down through 4 generations now. Your grandfather made it, Jasper carried it, I protected it. Now you hold it. Someday," Marcus continued, "you'll pass it to your children, and you'll tell them this story. About Dakota and 5 orphans, about a blizzard and a hearing and a family that refused to be broken. About how love is stronger than law, stronger than death, stronger than anything." Samuel looked at the horse, then at his father. "Will we be okay, Pa? Really okay?" Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with his son. "Yes. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Because we have each other. Because we know how to fight. because we come from people who survived impossible things. Your great-grandfather Dakota survived losing his wife and son, Marcus said. I survived losing my parents and nearly losing my siblings.
You'll survive losing your mother. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But you'll survive. And I'll be right here, Marcus added. Every step, every day, every moment you need me. That's my promise to you. That's my promise to your mother. That's my promise to Dakota and everyone who came before us. Samuel threw his arms around his father's neck, holding tight. I love you, Pa. I love you too, son, Marcus said, his voice breaking. More than you'll ever know. Until you have children of your own and understand what it means to love someone more than your own life. They held each other for a long time. Outside, the storm had completely passed. The sky was clearing. Stars were beginning to appear through breaks in the clouds. Finally, Samuel pulled back. Tell me one more thing about Dakota. Marcus smiled. What do you want to know? What was the last thing he said to you? Samuel asked. Before he died. Marcus's eyes grew distant with memory. Your morning he died, I was helping him feed the horses. He was moving slow, tired. I didn't know his heart was failing. Didn't know I only had hours left with him. We were standing in the barn, Marcus continued. Sun coming through the cracks in the walls, dust dancing in the light. And Dakota turned to me and said, Marcus, I need you to know something. I asked what, Marcus said. And he told me, I didn't save you that day at the auction. You saved me. You and your brothers and sisters. You gave me a reason to live when I'd lost everything that mattered. That's what I need you to remember. We saved each other. Marcus's voice broke. 2 hours later, he collapsed by the water trough, died before the doctor could arrive. Elena held his hand. I held his other hand. And we told him we loved him. Told him thank you. Told him we'd keep the family together, just like he taught us. And have you? Samuel asked. Kept the family together? Marcus looked at the photograph on the mantel, at the letters from his siblings stacked on the desk, at the wooden horse in Samuel's hands, at his son's face, so much like his mother's, so full of hope and fear and love. Yes, he said simply. We've kept it together. Through Dakota's death and marriages and children being born and hard times and good times, we've kept the promise. And now I'm keeping it with you, Marcus added, because you're my family, my son, my reason for getting up every morning, my reason for fighting through the grief. He stood and helped Samuel to his feet. It's late. Nearly 1 a.m. We should sleep. Can I keep Dusty in my room? Samuel asked. He's yours now, Marcus said. Keep him wherever you want. Just remember what he represents. The promise of family, the power of love, the strength that comes from holding on even when everything's falling apart. Samuel nodded and headed toward his bedroom. At the door, he paused and turned back. Pa, thank you for telling me the story, for helping me understand. That's what fathers do, Marcus said. We tell stories. We pass down wisdom. We help our children understand that they're not alone, that they come from strength, that they can survive anything as long as they have family. Samuel smiled, a real smile, the first Marcus had seen in months. Then he disappeared into his room. Marcus stood alone in the main room, staring at the dying embers. He thought about Dakota, about his mother, about his wife, about all the people he'd loved and lost, about how grief was just love with nowhere to go. But then he thought about Samuel, about Elena and Owen and Jasper and Lily, about grandchildren and great-nieces and nephews,
about the family that had grown from 5 orphans and 1 lonely rancher. The grief was still there, would always be there, but so was the love. So was the family. So was the promise. Marcus for the door. He walked to the mantel and touched the photograph one last time. "Thank you, Dakota," he whispered, "for everything. For saving us. For teaching us. For showing us what family really means." The embers glowed. The house settled. Outside, the storm was gone, leaving the world clean and white and new. Marcus went to his own room, climbed into bed, and for the first time in a year, fell asleep without crying. Because he wasn't alone. He had Samuel. He had his siblings. He had the memory of everyone he'd loved. He had family. And family was everything. In his room, Samuel placed Dusty on his nightstand where he could see it. The wooden horse glowed in the moonlight streaming through the window. 3 generations of love and promises carved into every line. Before he fell asleep, Samuel whispered to the horse, to his mother, to everyone who'd come before, "I'll keep the promise. I'll take care of Pa. I'll remember the story. I'll pass it on." And somewhere, in whatever place the dead go, Dakota Bennett smiled. Because the promise he'd made 35 years ago at an auction in Silver Creek was still being kept. The promise of 5 had become the promise of generations. And it would continue, passed down from father to son, mother to daughter, through all the years to come. Because some promises are too important to break. Some families are too strong to destroy. Some love is too powerful to die. And in a small ranch house in Montana, under a clearing winter sky, that love lived on. In stories told by firelight. In wooden horses passed down through time. In the unbreakable bond between a father and son who'd learned that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. About keeping promises. About loving each other through the storms. Always. Forever. No matter what. The end, but also the beginning. Because every ending is just another chance to keep the promise. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Montana ranch. Marcus woke to silence, the kind of deep quiet that only comes after a major storm has passed. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the house settle around him, feeling the familiar ache of grief that greeted him every morning since his wife died. But today, something was different. The weight was still there, but it felt shared somehow. Lighter. Like telling the story had redistributed the burden between him and Samuel, father and son, carrying it together instead of each trying to bear it alone. He rose and dressed, moving quietly through the cold house. The fire had gone completely out during the night. He needed to restart it, get coffee going, begin the rituals that marked every ranch morning. But first, he paused at Samuel's door. It was open a crack. Through it, he could see his son still sleeping, one hand stretched out on the nightstand, fingers touching the wooden horse. Even in sleep, Samuel was holding on to the promise, holding on to family. Marcus smiled and moved to the kitchen, building a new fire from kindling and patience. The flames caught quickly, hungry for fuel after the long, cold night. He filled the coffee pot with water from the pump, added grounds, set it on the stove to heat. While the coffee percolated, he walked to the window and looked out at the transformed landscape. Snow lay 3 feet deep across the yard, pristine and unmarked, except for rabbit tracks near the barn. The storm had buried everything, but it had also cleaned everything, made the world new again. He heard movement behind him, turned to see Samuel standing in the doorway, still in his nightclothes, hair sticking up in all directions, eyes puffy from crying but clear, present, here. "Morning, son," Marcus said quietly. "Morning, Pa," Samuel replied. His voice was hoarse but steady. They stood looking at each other for a long moment.
So much had passed between them last night. So many words, so many tears, so much truth finally spoken after a year of careful silence. "Coffee will be ready soon," Marcus said. "You hungry?" Samuel nodded. "Starving, actually. I can't remember the last time I was really hungry." "Grief does that," Marcus said. "Takes your appetite, makes food taste like ashes. But when you start wanting to eat again, that's when you know you're going to survive." He moved to the stove, pulled out the cast iron skillet. "How about flapjacks? Your mother's recipe?" Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." Marcus mixed batter while Samuel set the table. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of living together, of knowing each other's rhythms. But there was something new in it now, an understanding, an acceptance of grief as part of their daily life, not something to hide or apologize for. The flapjacks sizzled in butter. The coffee finished percolating. Marcus poured 2 cups, added sugar to Samuel's the way the boy liked it. They sat at the small table, the same table where Marcus had eaten his first meal in Dakota's cabin 40 years ago. "These are good," Samuel said after his first bite. "Really good." "Your mother taught me to make them," Marcus said. "First year we were married. I burned the first 3 batches. She laughed so hard she cried. Said it was a miracle I'd survived on my own cooking for so long." Samuel smiled, a real smile. "Tell me about her, about when you first met." Marcus leaned back, coffee cup warming his hands. "It was 1892. I was 20 years old, working the ranch with Dakota. We'd gone to Helena for supplies. I was loading flour sacks onto the wagon when this woman walked past. Nearly dropped everything." "She was beautiful," Marcus continued. "But it wasn't just that. There was something about the way she moved, confident, sure of herself, like she knew exactly who she was and didn't apologize for it." "What did you do?" Samuel asked. "I stood there like an idiot with my mouth open," Marcus admitted. "Dakota saw me staring and laughed, said, 'Well, go talk to her.' I said, 'What would I say?' He said, 'How about hello?'" Samuel laughed. The sound was rusty from disuse, but genuine. "So I did," Marcus said. "Walked right up to her and said, 'Hello.' She looked at me like I was crazy, said, 'Can I help you?' I said, 'I don't know. Can you?' She raised an eyebrow and said, 'That depends on what you need help with.' I told her I needed help remembering how to breathe," Marcus continued, "because apparently I'd forgotten the moment I saw her. She laughed, said that was the worst line she'd ever heard. Then she told me her name was Martha and asked if I'd like to try again." "What did you say?" Samuel asked, completely absorbed now. I said, "My name is Marcus Thornton. I work a ranch 15 miles north of Silver Creek. I'm not rich or particularly smart or good with words, but I would very much like to know you better if you'd give me the chance," Marcus said. And she looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "That's better. Much better." Samuel was smiling now, really smiling. She said, "Yes?" "She said we could write letters," Marcus corrected. "That she lived in Helena and didn't know me well enough to commit to anything more. So we wrote letters, every week for 6 months. I'd tell her about the ranch, about Dakota, about my family. She'd tell me about her work as a school teacher, about the books she was reading, about her dreams." 6 months of letters, Marcus continued.
Then one day she wrote and said she was coming to visit, that she wanted to see the ranch, meet Dakota, see if the man in the letters matched the man in person. "Did you?" Samuel asked. "She said I was better," Marcus said softly.
Said the letters were good, but the reality was better. That I was kind and funny and genuine. That she could see herself building a life with me. Dakota loved her immediately, Marcus continued. She asked him questions about raising us kids, about keeping families together, about what it took to be a good parent. And Dakota, who rarely talked about feelings, opened up to her in a way I'd never seen. He told her everything, Marcus said, about losing Sarah and Joshua, about buying us at auction, about the blizzard and the hearing, about learning that family isn't about blood, but about choice. "And your mother," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. She looked at him and said, "You're the kind of man I want my children to have as a grandfather." That's when I knew I was going to marry her. Samuel was quiet for a moment. "Did she meet Dakota before he died?" "She did," Marcus said. "We married in 1893. Dakota walked me down the aisle. All my siblings were there. Owen was my best man. Elena helped Martha with her dress. Jasper carved us a headboard for our wedding bed. And Lily, she made Martha a crown of wildflowers. It was the happiest day of my life up to that point," Marcus continued. "Standing there with Martha, surrounded by family, knowing that I was building something new without leaving behind what I'd been given." Dakota gave a speech at the reception, Marcus remembered. He was never good with words, but that day he stood up and said, "Marcus came to me as a scared 13-year-old boy. Today he's a man, a good man. And Martha, you're getting the best thing I ever helped create." Then he looked at all of us, Marcus said, at me and Elena and Owen and Jasper and Lily, and he said, "You 5 taught me that family is the only thing that matters, that love is stronger than law, that promises are worth keeping even when they cost everything. I'm proud of you, all of you." "He died 10 years later," Marcus said quietly. "But he lived long enough to meet you. You were born in 1894. Dakota held you when you were 2 days old, said you had your mother's eyes and my stubborn chin." Samuel's eyes went wide. "I met him? I don't remember." "You were 9 years old when he died," Marcus said. "You remember him. You just don't remember that you do. The man who taught you to whistle, who carved you that wooden duck, who used to let you ride on his shoulders around the ranch." Recognition dawned slowly on Samuel's face. "The old man with the blue eyes, who smelled like leather and horses." "That was Dakota," Marcus confirmed. "Your grandfather in every way that mattered. He loved you fiercely. Used to say you were proof that the family would continue, that the promise would outlive him." "I wish I remembered more," Samuel said. "That's why stories matter," Marcus replied. "Why I told you everything last night. Because memories fade, people die, but stories survive. And as long as we tell the stories, the people in them never really leave us." They finished breakfast in silence, both lost in thought. After the dishes were cleared, Marcus said, "We should check on the animals. Storm like that, they'll need extra care." They dressed in layers, pulled on boots and gloves and heavy coats, stepped out into a world transformed by snow. The cold hit them immediately, sharp and clean, but the sky was brilliant blue, and the sun was already beginning to warm the day. They worked together, father and son, breaking ice on water troughs, distributing extra hay, checking each animal for signs of cold damage. The work was hard but familiar, comforting in its routine.
Pa, Samuel said as they were finishing, can I ask you something? Anything, Marcus replied. Do you think Mama knew? Samuel asked. Before she died, do you think she knew we'd be okay? Marcus stopped what he was doing, turned to face his son fully. I know she did. The last thing she said to me, right before the end, was, "Take care of our boy. Tell him I love him. Tell him to remember that family is forever." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. I miss her so much. I know, Marcus said. I miss her too. Every single moment of every single day. But son, she's not really gone. She's in you, in the way you laugh, the way you think, the kindness in your heart. And she's in me, Marcus continued, in the lessons she taught me, the love she gave me, the family we built together. Death can take someone's body, but it can't take their impact. It can't erase what they meant. Dakota's been dead 17 years, Marcus said, but he's still here. In the way I parent you, in the values I hold, in the promises I keep. Your mother will be the same. She'll live through us, through the stories we tell, through the love we pass down. Samuel wiped his eyes. Will you tell me more stories about her? Not just the big moments, but the little ones, the everyday things. Every day if you want, Marcus promised. I'll tell you how she sang while cooking, how she read books by the fire every night, how she had this way of tilting her head when she was thinking, how she laughed at my terrible jokes even when they weren't funny. I'll tell you everything, Marcus continued, so you never forget. So she stays alive in our memories, even though her body is gone. That's what Dakota taught me. That love is stronger than death, because memory is eternal. They finished the chores and walked back to the house together. The sun was higher now, warming the day, beginning the slow melt that would take weeks to complete. At the porch steps, Samuel stopped. Pa, I want to go visit her grave, today. Will you come with me? Marcus's throat tightened. He hadn't been to Martha's grave since the funeral. Couldn't bear it. Couldn't face the finality of that stone marker. But looking at his son's face, seeing the need there, he knew it was time. Yes, he said. After lunch, we'll go together. They spent the afternoon at the small cemetery 2 miles from the ranch. Martha's grave was marked with a simple stone, her name, her dates, and underneath, the words Marcus had chosen. Beloved wife and mother, forever in our hearts. They stood there in the snow, father and son, grieving together instead of alone. Samuel cried, Marcus cried, and slowly, gradually, the grief that had been suffocating them began to transform into something else. Not gone, never gone, but bearable. I love you, Mama, Samuel whispered. I'm going to be okay. Pa's going to help me. We're going to help each other. Marcus put his arm around his son's shoulders. They stood there until the sun began to set, painting the snow gold and pink and orange. On the way home, Samuel said, Pa, can I ask one more thing? Always, Marcus replied. The wooden horse, Dusty. When I have children someday, I'm supposed to pass it to them, right? Tell them the story? That's right, Marcus confirmed. And they'll pass it to their children, Samuel continued. And so on. Forever. Forever, Marcus agreed. The promise continues, generation after generation. That's good, Samuel said. That means none of us are ever really gone. As long as someone tells the story. As long as someone keeps the promise. That's exactly right, Marcus said. That's what Dakota understood. That's what he taught me.
Family isn't just about the present. It's about the past and the future. It's about honoring those who came before and building for those who come after. They reached the ranch as darkness fell. Inside, Marcus lit lamps while Samuel started a fire. They made dinner together, ate together, cleaned up together. Partners in survival. Family. That night, before bed, Samuel came to his father, carrying the wooden horse. "Will you tell me one more story about Dakota and Jasper and this horse?" Marcus smiled. "Come, sit. I'll tell you about the day Jasper's father carved it, about the love that went into every cut, about how something made with love can survive anything." And he did. He told the story by lamplight, his son listening with rapt attention, both of them wrapped in the warmth of memory and love and promise. Outside, snow began falling again, light flakes that caught the lamplight and sparkled like stars. The world was cold and dark and sometimes cruel. But inside that ranch house, there was warmth, there was love, there was family. And there was a promise, 40 years old and still being kept. The promise that family is forever, that love survives death, that stories carry us through the darkest nights. Marcus finished the story. Samuel hugged him good night and went to bed, placing Dusty back on the nightstand where he could see it. Marcus sat alone for a while, looking at the photograph on the mantel. 6 people who'd become a family against all odds, who'd fought the world and won, who'd kept their promises. "Thank you," he whispered to Dakota, to his mother, to Martha, to everyone who'd taught him about love and family and keeping promises. "Thank you for everything." The lamps burned low, the fire settled, and in that small ranch house in Montana, 2 people slept peacefully, held together by bonds stronger than blood, promises deeper than law, love more powerful than death. The promise of 5 had become the promise of generations, and it would continue, carried forward by wooden horses and stories told by firelight, passed down from parent to child through all the years to come. Because some promises are too important to break. Some families are too strong to destroy. Some love is too powerful to die. And in the morning, they would wake and face another day, together. Always together. That was the promise. That was the legacy. That was love. Forever. The end.